So Neil, you switched gears a little bit on us there with your idea of your video with the houses on fire. What, if you don't mind me asking, what do you see in the market in the next couple of years? What's kind of your feeling of what's going on, and talk to us a little bit about that. I know you have a real estate background as well, so I'd love to know.
Yeah, so real estate's super local, it's hyper local. But if you think about these markets, Florida, Texas, Nevada, Colorado, these markets where people have migrated, those migration patterns have only accelerated because of COVID, right? Because right now, the value that somebody places on their home where they reside, it exploded over the last year. It's a personal feeling because you spent so much time in your home that you realize, hey, this isn't the right place, this isn't the right neighborhood, or I want this for my home. So the number of people who want a home or who are into home ownership was already rising, but it just hit a hockey stick in 2020 because of COVID. So that demand exploded. As a result, like you see all this activity on the demand side, the supply of homes for sale is still very, very low. So, like the number of homes available is not, like there's not enough homes available to serve this demand. So, just basic supply demand, that's going to keep a floor under prices. That's going to keep prices rising. The only thing I would say that would change that is if demand went down significantly, because I don't see supply increasing at enough of a pace. There's not enough people selling their home because they're staying put or they're just not making as many moves. The other thing is builders underbuilt. If you look at the stat on, new home builds for the decade 20 or from 2000 to 2010 versus the decade 2010 to 2020, they built like only 40% of what they built in the previous decade because they didn't anticipate this level of demand and because they were so burnt by the housing crash of 2008, 2009. Right. They didn't want to put themselves in that position again, right? So if you look at our markets right now, we have maybe 1 month or less of inventory. Before the housing market collapsed in 2008, 2009, there was like 7 or 8 months of inventory in certain markets, right? So the only way you're going to see a shift is if all of a sudden this supply demand thing gets out of whack. And on the demand side, the only thing I could see that would cause that is if interest rates spike. Now, interest rates volatility is okay, but if they shoot up like 2 points in a short period of time, then that's going to, throw water on the fire as far as demand goes. And then you could see this thing cool off a little bit. But I just don't see a crash. I just see like ebb and flow. Maybe you'll see a little bit of a slowdown at some point.
Yeah, you can't find a house here. I mean, it's like, I'm sure it's the same way there. It's like it's on the market for an hour.
Yeah,
that's what's happened, right?
I didn't think about the builder aspect as much. It's like, remember like whiskey became popular, Blanton's. Like you would go try to get I don't know if you drink whiskey, Neil, but like you would go get like a glass of Blanton's and they'd be like, yeah, we don't have it. No one had it because it was like it had to be aged for so long. And they didn't predict the demand, and it wasn't as quick of saying like, hey, we're just going to make more Blanton's whiskey because it has to be aged for a certain time period. And I think when you mentioned that, maybe I'm an alcoholic, but the fact that the builders, they can't just go, oh yeah, there's more demand, let's build, right? Because then you're talking about materials, you're talking about labor, and you're talking about cycles where that's going to take years to catch up, maybe even a decade to catch up. So that's fascinating.
Well, I actually asked that question for a reason because I think the supply chain's been hurt from COVID, right? You talk about the builders not building to the degree of the demand, but they just didn't forecast the type of demand. How do you see that? You talk about supplies. If you're building a house, it's not any easier of a conversation than not having inventory because the cost of materials is so much higher. So how do you feel like that?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, look at lumber, right?
Yeah, I mean, $100 for a sheet of plywood.
It's ridiculous, right? So it's gone up. There's signs of inflation. A lot of people say it's transitory inflation. I think some of this inflation is real, maybe here to stay. But the point that you just brought up about not being able to just flip a switch about demand, like that's really how it works, right? You think about land development deals. You're buying land. Like, how long does it take to prep that? How long does it take to build labor teams? And there's a shortage of labor, equipment, supply chain. Like, all these things take years and years and years to go out. And they just didn't want to get ahead of their skis. So they were always really conservative with that because of what happened in the previous decade. So now they might be getting more aggressive. And that's where you're going to see the shift. If you see these guys getting super, super aggressive with like buying up everything, and their share prices are super high, and you start to see like that excess, and that's when you could probably plan out 5 years ahead of that, or then you could say, okay, now things are going to get overdone. They're going to be too much supply. But we're nowhere near that today. So, if you're buying a property to live in, that I wouldn't worry about it. If you can find it and it makes sense for you and your family, I'd pull the trigger, because you can't time this thing. It moves up and down in the short run. But the main thing is you have to get the property, right? If the property's not available, it doesn't matter what the market's doing. You can't time it if you can't find the actual thing to buy. And then on the real estate investing side, it's definitely become more difficult to get deals to make sense on a spreadsheet. Right. So you just have to be more selective. Or, the good thing is that the cost of money is cheap. Rents have been rising at the same pace, if not more, than prices. So that's kind of made deals work. But it is getting more difficult on the investing side to make sense of these numbers.